This is a beautiful production. It's called A History of the GAA in 100 Objects. It does exactly what it says in the tin, and its author, Siobhan Doyle, is in studio with us this morning. Morning, Siobhan.
Morning,
Thanks,
Adrian.
Amelia, for coming in. It's a cracker of a little book. It's like eminently pick-upable, and you can sort of dip in and out. You don't have to sit down and read it, but recommend don't sit down and read it all in one go. What's your favourite item in the book?
I can't be saying that.
Come on now.
So picking your favourite child.
Only thing I want to know.
It changes on a given day. One of them actually is Doreen McVercu. She was a GAA, a sports reporter for Radio on the Gaeltachta.
Yeah.
And she used to go to matches on her Honda 50, and she used to ring in the results on like a payphone. But one of the objects is a press pass that she had to make herself because the stewards in the grounds wouldn't believe that a woman would be reporting on the matches. So, you know, the thoughts of her sitting down with her scissors and her paper and her glue, trying to make this make-do press pass until her official one came through. So that to me was a really important story to tell about, I suppose, the plight of women when it comes to GAA in the media and stuff like that.
We've all had to make up a fake ID at some point.
There you go.
I've sort of picked out a few things that I thought were really interesting to talk about, so I think we'll just throw a few at you if that's all right.
No bother.
I've gone for number one as the first one that I've picked. It's the wooden mether, and people will be able to see it on screen there. Like it looks like the obvious, and that was kind of why it jumped out for me. The design that Liam McCarthy is based off, basically, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's a four-handled wooden vessel that's in the collection, the National Museum of Ireland. Don't have a date on it, it's just generically medieval.
Okay.
But a lot of the trophies that we see are based on that design. But wooden methers would have been used at like medieval feasts and passed around so that everyone in the room could get a drink out of the cup.
Yeah.
So we also get a bit of that in GAA as well. We're not supposed to. 12-week ban.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that actually, or if I was, I'd forgotten about it.
Yeah, but I also wanted to include that to demonstrate that, you know, the GAA didn't just start on the 1st November in 1884. It was, you know, there's lots of objects that represent times before that. So we have hair hurling balls from 800 years ago. We've paintings of handball being played in Monaghan from the 1700s. So there's lots of things, lots of objects around that predate the GAA in 1884.
And Liam McCarthy gifted it 6 years before his death, and it was made by jewellers and Grafton Street.
That's right.
There's all these little detail about this thing that just appears that everybody goes, oh, well, sure, that's that thing. It's like always been there. It's a lovely little detail. And Leitrim, the party poopers, wanted the drink. They wanted they wanted to change, so there were that point that you made about the ban. They were like, we need to stop people drinking out of it.
And they quoted, to curb the evils of drinking, they wanted the GAA to bring in cups that had a lid glued to them.
No way.
So that, you know, it couldn't be passed around. So needless to say, it didn't go through at Congress.
I can't believe Leitrim, like, I mean, it's just because they win nothing, they're like,
Harsh. Yeah, but fair. Yeah.
The Croke Park map is the next one that I want to have a look at. It will show it up on screen there for people. And again, like as I said, some of these things are about the item and some of them are about the story behind the item, but a really interesting history of how that ground came into the hands of the GAA.
Yeah, like we've a stunning national stadium today of international standard, but it came from humble beginnings. You know, a man called Frank Deneen Brazel bought the grounds at Jones's Road with his own money because the GAA couldn't afford it. He sold his farm in Ballylanders in County Limerick and loaned the GAA the money to buy it. An incredibly generous gesture on his part, so I just wanted to make sure that he was represented as well. So that map of Croke Park very much tells the story of, you know, humble beginnings, and now we have a fantastic stadium as the headquarters of our games.
It went to a vote of Central Council as to whether they should buy it or not, and it was like
scraped
overwhelmingly through by a vote. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible. I think if we have the picture there, we'll throw it up on screen just to give people a bit of a sense of the area at that time around Croke Park and the piece of land, the pocket of it that the Deneen guy from Limerick, he had bought a section of it, is that right? And then more of it belonged to...
exactly, and they gradually started buying more and more when it came up. But the hill is named after him as well. It's called Deneen Hill 16 in his name, but it kind of gets lost because it's just handier to say the hill. So it's important that, you know, his story is brought through as well.
That's it's probably bit far away. People get a bit of a sense of the blue bit was the Dunedin bit, and then the rest of it was belonging to the Jesuits, whatever the case might be. It's a lovely little story around that. The Dublin County Board minutes and the Secretary's report, particularly, that appears once a year at the minute, and everybody gets great reading out of, is a great thing to read. But that was one of the other ones, and particularly how it pertained to the selection of county colours, which is again one of these things that just appears and you just accept it as norm. But
and it's something we mightn't even think about. So in 1913, the GAA insisted that every team formally pick their county colours. So some teams like Dublin got to pick their colours. So that was blue and white, and that's what the minutes in the book represents. Harry Boland was chairman of Dublin GAA at the time. So
and signature on the minutes and all. It's incredible.
Yeah, so all these different people from history kind of creeping into these objects as well. But I suppose the whole point is to show that it might just be to look at it on paper, it might just be a mundane report, but when we dig deeper, there's so many layers and so many stories to tell.
You must have been driving up and down the country to get all these stories.
Yeah,
it must have been serious amount of research.
My trusty Corolla brought me down roads and borings I've never been before. I'll probably never be again. But yeah, I travelled in 32 counties. I wanted to make sure that every county was represented, and thankfully it worked. But it was basically every weekend for about 9 months. But it was great crack.
Yeah,
I can
imagine, because you nearly have to be in person meeting people for these stories to really come through. It's one thing chatting on Zoom or the phone or whatever, but you have to meet up.
And where possible, I went to see the objects, whether they're in museums or private collections or whatever. But like that, when you're talking to people, when you're talking to the owners, and you kind of gain a bit of trust, they give you a bit more information.
The line that I loved from that thing was the description of how it all came about. After some discussion, it was decided to adopt as the county colours a light blue jersey with a white shield bearing the city arms, which I presume is the crest. And the Assistant Secretary was directed to register same with the Leinster and Central Councils and to procure quotations for the supply of 2 sets of jerseys. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
As simple as that.
So simple. And there it is, yeah.
You mentioned the chance nature of some of the other counties and how they came about their colours, including Cork. Yeah. Everybody would have been sort of assumed that the blood and bandage and all that stuff was, but it was real chance sort of encounter.
Yeah, Cork wore blue and white for many years, and then during the revolutionary years, with their offices were ransacked and the jerseys were robbed, and they had to borrow them from another team, and then it just ended up in red and white. The same with many counties and many teams. A lot of it came about from a clash of colours in a big match, and then one of them had to change, and they just stuck with it. Some of it is superstitious as well. They had to change, and then they won the match, so we'll keep wearing that jersey. But there's loads of stories like that.
Yeah, they're great. The overage minor players was the other thing from the Dublin County Board. It was like, geez, some things never change.
Yeah, there was a lot of that back in the day,
one of the other ones I wanted to mention was the poster banning GAA events. So this was the 11th of May 1916, which in the historical context of everything that had gone 2 weeks beforehand is an incredible piece to have included. Yeah, so
posters were a really important way of communicating warnings and things to do and what not to do. And one of the posters in the book is one, as you said, from 1916 that was banning GAA events because the British authorities saw them as a threat, as an excuse for people to get together and plot other things.
It's mad because that's in the thick of it. James Connolly, I think, was shot on the 12th, like the next day. So you're literally right in the middle of such a historic moment.
In the thick of it, yeah, absolutely.
And there's loads of context around how all that came about. And then the other one that I wanted to talk about was the John Joe Doyle's goggles.
Yeah.
And there was also another item which was must have been was the first hurling helmet. Certainly looked like the first one.
It was actually a motorcycle helmet.
Was it adopted?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
The goggles, first of all, were belonged to a man called John Joe Goggles Doyle. He played for Clare in the 1910s and for Newmarket and Fergus, but he wore glasses, and there's no contact lenses then, no helmets. So he made goggles to protect his glasses. They're made out of bicycle spokes and medical plasters. He just made them himself.
It looks like it might be a danger to you.
Yeah.
Itself.
It looks like the bicycle spokes would do much more damage than any hurl to his face. But very fondly nicknamed Goggles Doyle after that. And then in the 60s, we have in Cork, a player for UCC, he suffered a head injury, and then he decided to take matters into his own hands and source a helmet, but there were no helmets. So he used a motorcycle helmet and went on as a sub in a Cork County final. You can imagine, you know, what people were saying on the sidelines, who's this lad coming in? But you know, even though helmets weren't mandatory until much late, you know, it was only kind of recently enough, 2009, you know, there were murmurings of head protection like in the 1960s.
Was there? Yeah, right.
Yeah, because it's a very sad story. Tip were playing Kilkenny in an All-Ireland final in, can't remember, the 60s or 70s, but one of the Kilkenny players, Tommy Walsh, lost an eye in the All-Ireland final. Right. So that kind of got conversations going, and we see players starting to wear helmets. So it took something like that for the conversations to start.
That's the I was very rudely flicking through the book as you were talking, Siobhan. That's what I was after. That's give people an idea of exactly how what that looked like.
Yeah.
Is there a feeling that sorry, which came first, the goggles or the
goggles?
The goggles came first. Is there a feeling that you're very sure about that? Is there a feeling that was like the first iteration of what ultimately became the helmet, or is there? Is there?
Yeah,
right, okay.
Like it took a while. You know, it was still kind of frowned upon to wear protection and to wear a helmet, but
only until very recently, culturally, it became like you know, the hard man. Even obviously they brought it in so that no matter what age grade you're playing on, you have to wear one. I guess.
And it's bizarre to think, you know, that even the thoughts of going out without a helmet now is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. Is there something in it that people always talk to you about? What's the is there a standout thing that people like?
John 37 sign is getting a lot lot of talk. You know, because one we kind of all identify with. It's pretty much iconic. It's very visibly iconic. John 37, a famous Limerick supporter, used to go to all the matches and spread the word of God by having a big sign with the verse on it. But that actually came from 1987 when he was watching Pat Cash getting the trophy at Wimbledon, and he spotted someone with a similar sign in the background. He said, I'm going to do that.
Okay, right. And he got away with it for years.
He sure did.
Yeah.
Good word it that way. It'd be interesting to see if you were to introduce that thing into Croke Park now with some sort of a statement.
Well, there was a story of him getting stopped at a pretty big match, a quarter-final or a semi-final a few years ago. A steward stopped him and said, no, you can't come in, and he didn't go into the match. He walked off and went home, and then the GAA had to come out, or Croke Park had to come out the following week and said, no, you're more than welcome to come in. But I think he was the exception. They weren't encouraging everyone to bring in extremely large placards.
Yeah, of course.
First thing when you landed in, I was like, I have a couple of things at home. I think it would be perfect. So I presume everybody's saying to you, I have stuff that, you know, so what's next?
What's next? I'd love to expand it to other sports because Ireland has an incredibly rich sporting history, and as a historian I kind of worry about all the stuff that's locked away in people's attics and in museum stores and stuff like that, so it's definitely only the start of something. Okay, well, it's an absolute cracker production. It's out in perfect time for Christmas, so I highly recommend, if you're a GAA fan at all, it's definitely the sort of thing you want for the GAA fan in your life, that you can dip in and have a bit of a read. It's some great information and lovely stories. Siobhan, thanks a million for coming in. Let's look at the next project. Cheers. Chat to you down the line.